So just the other day, I picked up two, they could be great films at my local library. Now, I know that there are a lot of collectors out there who have their favorite websites like, Amazon whenever they have sales, or Orbit DVD, or Diabolic, so many other companies, some that I've even stumbled upon recently, that while they are very, very competitive, they don't always give you that wow feeling of walking away feeling like you've got an incredible movie at basement prices. And rightfully so, because they are a business and they have to make money, so it doesn't make sense for them to sell movies at the prices that I would consider a steal. I got that this time at one of my local libraries that I was just speaking of. I'm digging around, and I find these two releases, and I've never heard of them, but I was willing to take a flyer on them because they were at a great, great bargain. What was the first film? Chimes at Midnight, starring Orson Welles. This movie looks like it was released by, here we go, Mr. Bongo, Essential World Cinema and Music. And it's literally right on the front, and I missed it completely. Mr. Bongo, Essential World Cinema and Music is where this is. This is the 50th anniversary restored edition. Like I said, starring Orson Welles. Most people know from his film Citizen Kane, which is by AFI standard considered the best film ever made. I mean, I'll go along with that. I mean, it's a very well-made movie, especially for the time. Is it a film that I would have in my collection? Not really. I never really have the feeling of, man, I mean, knock back a few beers and watch Citizen Kane. Just not my thing. It is a great film technically, but it doesn't mean that it's the most entertaining one to watch. However, great film, great writer director, and he has great acting chops as well. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with his War of the Worlds broadcast from 1938, where he had people losing their minds thinking that the world was being taken over by aliens. Same guy. But I literally never heard of this film. I found it, as I said, on Blu-ray. It's a Blu-ray at my local library. On the back, it says, "My greatest ever film," is what Orson Welles stated. "Greatness. Here is a film to treasure," is what Roger Ebert says. The Guardian gave it a 5 out of 5. The Independent said it was wonderful and gave it a 5 out of 5. And Time Out says that it is a dark masterpiece shot through the slapstick and sorrow. Okay. But figured I'd take a shot at it. Not only does the film star Orson Welles, but it was also directed by Orson Welles. Here's the thing. I'll take a flyer on a film I've never seen, never heard of, for a bargain. Okay, so we'll come back to what the pricing was on this in just a second, because I want to talk about the next Blu-ray that I found at the library, because right now, this upcoming film, is one that is actually scheduled for a 4K release within this month, I believe, actually. And that is Elvis in King Creole. This is a Paramount Presents release. Comes with the slip cover that you kind of can open up like this, which is pretty cool. That's not bad, right? Pretty sure that was the original poster. This one stars, obviously, Elvis Presley, Caroline Jones, Walter Matthau, Dolores Hart, Dean Jagger, and Vic Morrow. So, as I said before, this is a Paramount Presents release, and It came with the slipcover, super nice. There's no wear and tear on this thing. It looks practically brand new. So did this, the one for Chimes at Midnight. And they both look pretty much brand new, and found them at my library for a deal. Now, what is that deal? Well, this one here did not have, oh yeah, it does have the pricing at the bottom, but you won't be able to see it actually. But it is right down there. They scratch out the barcode and put the price right down there. Probably can't see it, but you will be able to see it on the other one. Because I'm very thankful that they did not write it on the actual slipcover, that they actually took the time to remove it from the slipcover and write it on the back where it can be easily taken off. And are you ready to see what this pricing is? Costs the same as Chimes at Midnight. $1. $1 for King Creole on Blu-ray that is scheduled to have a 4K release later this month. And I already have it. Elvis Presley brings a new beat to Bourbon Street in King Creole, presented here newly remastered from a 4K film transfer. So this is actually a much better deal than what I thought it was. $2, 2 films. And you know what? I actually want to see what Chimes at Midnight is selling for right now. So right now it shows that Chimes at Midnight on Blu-ray is selling for $32.29 on Amazon. $32.29. And as of this moment, if you go looking for the Paramount Presents Blu-ray of Elvis and King Creole, this is on Amazon from a reseller for $42.97. Now, I'm pretty sure you can probably have a little bit of luck finding it on any of the other online retailers. Probably even go to eBay. You can find it for a little bit cheaper. But if you went to Amazon right now, you're paying $42 for this one and $32 for Chimes at Midnight. And I got both for $2. I call that a freaking bargain. What I'm going to do is actually take some time and watch both films and come back to you guys with a review and see if it's something that's worth collecting and actually adding to your collection. Because the thing is that I, for a very long time, would buy every movie I wanted to see as opposed to curating them a little bit. I went for, if I found a great deal on a movie, great deal meaning I was out and found a Blu-ray or 4K for $5, $6, $8, whatever, I would just add it to my library and say I would get to it. And my library grew to about a little over I stopped counting at about 3,000. And I realized that out of that 3,000 films, I probably only watched about 200 of them, and the rest were still in plastic. And every time I moved, I had to pack up all those movies and lug them around with me to the new place and then unbox them and then put them in the shelves and everything. And then if I moved again, I had to do the same thing until we moved into the house that I'm in now. And it left me with very little space. And more importantly, I just realized that all this stuff was in plastic. It had been in plastic so long that plastic was starting to turn and curl up and everything. And I just said to myself, if I'm not, what are the chances that I'll actually watch these? Because essentially I was treating my physical media the way you treat your watch list on Amazon Prime or Netflix. You fill it full of titles and you never get to any of them. You will watch something else, and your queue will just be sitting there looking at you going, really? Like, so I ended up taking, I would say, pretty much all of my collection, and I sold it. I sold everything, and I started rebuilding from the ground up with only titles that I know that I will always go back and watch because they are, number one, entertaining. Number two, they have great shelf appeal. And three, they are rewatchable as hell. That's my three criteria now for keeping physical media or buying physical media, unless it's a bargain in this case, right? And if it is a bargain, then what I want to do is I want to watch them and see if they fit those three criteria, at least two out of three, right? I can forego a bit of shelf appeal. This one, I mean, looking at it like this, not a lot of shelf appeal, but I can forego that if it at least meets the other two. If it's at least something that is truly entertaining and truly rewatchable, then I'm okay with that. But this one, right out of the gate, definitely has some shelf appeal, right? I definitely dig this. I just need to see if it's if it's entertaining and if it's rewatchable. So what I'll do is I'll take both of these titles, I'll pop them in, and I'll be back to you guys shortly with a review. But until then, keep finding good films at great prices. Talk to you soon.